Good afternoon and welcome back to the IJIS Institute National Symposium. You have just rejoined us at our last of three panels or last of three sessions, which is supporting our theme for the day, which is public safety and/or police reform. During the conversations, you'll understand the distinction of why I put in public safety and police reform. For those of you that were able to join us for the earlier sessions, we started off with a keynote address from Ron Davis, who provided us the big picture on the challenges, on the need to redefine what we want public safety and policing to look like. We followed with what was a town hall that was moderated by former New Jersey Attorney General Peter Harvey and several chiefs, Chief Azevedo, Carmen Best, former retired Carmen Best from Seattle PD, and Jim Birch from the National Police Foundation, who took us into more of a tactical discussion, a practical discussion on how to deal with some of those definition issues, implementation issues, data needs, policy needs, and even transparency issues with the public. This third chapter of that trilogy is about allowing and inviting industry and practitioners to provide what are solutions that they've brought together, given their experiences, given their backgrounds, and given what they interpret the requirements to be. As with many of the IJIS endeavors and the challenges that we face, these are efforts that are in progress, and we always look to the input of the practitioners in order for us to better refine, define, and implement solutions that are more effective for the operations, or a little redundant. So to that end, what I would like to do is introduce our speakers for this afternoon. What was interesting when we did the prep call, of course, we have representatives from IBM and from Motorola. I mentioned that in a previous session. But they were all very, very energetic and passionate about the solutions that might map to what the requirements are and the needs are that they have experienced and that we know to be true. What they were equally passionate about is the fact that no single tool, no single solution can be delivered or should be delivered without the incorporation, the respect of, the adherence to policy issues, to training needs, to ConOps issues, to transparency issues, to engagement of the public. We see that as a recurring theme yesterday with the pandemic, today with reform, that none of this is done in a vacuum. We need to bring critical partners to the table. We need to understand that this is a comprehensive solution that will evolve over time, and that we need to understand that there are no two jurisdictions, even if they sound like alike in their demographics and in their numbers. There's no two agencies that will use a single solution in the same manner. There's not going to be a mirror reflection of that. So to that end, allow me to introduce four different individuals that represent two different member companies. I'm going to give you actually an alternate perspective. I'm going to start with IBM, go to Moto, and I'm going to start with Moto, then go to IBM and alternate. And the reason I do that is because in each case, we have individuals that come from specific skill sets and industries and SME land that gives them a valued contribution to their solution development and to the understanding of the challenges at hand. So we start with retired Major Michael McDonald from the Delaware State Police. He's current industry specialist with the software enterprise industry team at Motorola. He served 21 years in uniform at Delaware State Police, and he followed that by an additional 18 years as the CIO for Delaware State Police. Mike and I have worked together in many, many national opportunities, which included the NSI and others. He is one of those perfect examples of coming from the practitioner world, understanding the total comprehensive solutions that need to be put in place, and enabling the communication between industry solutions, mapping to the requirements at hand. He will be joined by Bill Josko of IBM, Worldwide Public Safety and Justice Segment Leader. Bill has been within public sector for over 3 decades, and not just in one domain, not in just one area. He has serviced public safety, emergency management, homeland security, justice, courts, corrections. And I say that with authority because Bill and I go back several decades, though we don't like to admit it. And he was one of the first individual salespeople that I met many decades ago that resonated so truly to understand what the public sector needs were. So to that end, he has brought that to IBM, and you will see that for yourselves when we start the discussion. We also have now from Moto, Sean Jowell, retired Assistant Chief Deputy from Pinellas County Sheriff's Office in Florida. He too is supporting Motorola as a public safety solutions specialist. And as with his titles, it's apparent that he brings knowledge of the field, and his discussion will show you that he has knowledge of his solution and the comprehensive nature of the challenges that we address. And finally, we have Katie O'Malley from IBM, Strategic Business Development and Global Public Sector Executive, that not only services and supports public safety, justice, et cetera, but also works across healthcare, life sciences, and government. And actually, besides the energy that she brings and the total picture that she contributes, it's interesting that as we discuss the pandemic one day and reform the next day, we so clearly understand that no problem is within one silo. No problem is in one sector. So the greater knowledge that any individual brings to the table with regard to all of the other challenges that are happening on our partner perspectives or tables, the greater value we have. So she brings that asset to our team and to our discussion. So to that end, I thank you all for joining us. It's about 2:39. I will toss this over to Mike first to start the discussions, and then I will rejoin you all on stage probably about 45 minutes and usher some of the questions that I expect that we'll be getting from the audience. So thank you all and good luck.
Thank you, Maria, and welcome to our audience. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. Just real quick, both Bill and I are former IJIS board members. So I know he won't mind me saying that because we both enjoyed our time on the board. And just to put in a real quick plug for IJIS, I encourage all of our member companies to get involved, to be a part of the conversation, and also to heed the call from Chairman Dan Toohey to where you can to get involved in the leadership of IJIS by joining the board or at least competing for those slots. It really does help you understand the organization and get in touch with your colleagues with not only that fellowship, but also with the industry practices and sharing of ideas. And so I encourage you to do that. But all of us, I believe, listened to the previous discussions, both with the keynote and also with the panel discussion or the town hall with the chiefs of police. And we really are encouraged by what we heard. We're passionate about that, as Maria said. And what we're going to do today is try to bring some of the industry products that our companies have that might be able to impact that of what you heard today. Now, we heard a lot about trust and legitimacy and the critical nature of that to policing, transparency and accountability. And I'd like to start off with just talking about what probably is the most popular technology that is going across the nation with people trying to acquire it, agencies trying to acquire it. Some already have had experience with it. Others, they're being legislated to get, but I think they all would agree that it is going to be a good idea to acquire body-worn cameras and the technology and the opportunity that comes with that technology. In my day, we didn't have it. We had to document the activities, and we also didn't have a proliferation of cell phones that were coming out of the woodwork to document, whether you knew it or not, the activities that you were being involved in at the time, at that particular incident, investigation, critical incident, or high stress incident in that regard. But when we look at some of the technologies that are out there, there are some key things that we think we bring to the table that would help impact some of the things that we saw on the national level with respect to Minneapolis and other areas that kind of lit the match on what we saw in the environment and in the social circles out on the street and the social unrest, I should say, with respect to what we saw. And with respect to body-worn cameras, that is the opportunity to show your side of the story, the opportunity to have context, which I think is very important in any conversation with respect to how an event unfolded. But one of the things that happened in that incident in Minneapolis with the George Floyd incident was we had people around that were videoing the actions of the officer. And if they had the opportunity to get that to say a supervisor or at least at the police department, instead of just posting it later on or after the fact to what they saw, that probably could have helped. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But with respect to a body-worn camera, when you have the opportunity to be viewing firsthand what you're encountering, what the situation, what's surrounding you, what all of the elements and variables that you're involved in, we think being able to stream that video back live to either a command center, a real-time crime center, a 911 center, where a supervisor or a third party, so to speak, who is not physically there, who can take an objective measure of what's going on, to be able to have that supervisory involvement is going to be key moving forward. The opportunity to do that and give a situational awareness and real-time view of what's going on. And we heard in the previous discussion where the culture of a police agency may not allow a younger police officer to perhaps object to what's going on around them. And that's something that we have to work on. That's something that we have to train for. That's something we have to insist upon in the police reform issues that are moving forward. So in that incident, you saw junior officers, many of whom didn't have a lot of time on the job, that were going to that culture. I remember when I was a recruit, and I remember when I was in the academy, we had a picture of a recruit up on the bulletin board with real big ears, meaning you wanted to be able to listen, but with a zipper across the mouth to keep your mouth shut. We kind of got to get away from that in our training, and I think we'll talk about that too a little bit later. But remote activation of a body-worn camera is another opportunity to provide that, again, that insight, that ability that when in a stressful situation, when an officer gets out of their car or is on foot patrol and encounters a serious situation like they did in Minneapolis, suppose they forget to turn on or activate the body-worn camera. We think it would be critical to be able to remotely have a dispatcher or an analyst or even a supervisor to be able to remotely engage that camera and turn it on for the officer. And here's another opportunity that is unique to what Motorola has in the industry, and that's in our WatchGuard line. And we acquired WatchGuard a few years ago. And one of the things that technology provides for is record after the fact, or RATF. This is really important because there are times when the officer will forget, not through any intentional act, but will forget to activate their body-worn camera. If they do that and they continue to go on, most of the agencies will provide, if they did turn it on, maybe a minute or 30-second, I think 30 seconds is probably optimum, of pre-record. Record after the fact is not really pre-record, but once the body-worn camera or even the in-car WatchGuard camera is activated or turned on, I should say, not necessarily press record, then that incident can be recreated later on because the camera is actually recorded. Now, I want to stop there real quick and say that's not a popular item to everyone. Some will think, I don't always want that to happen. It's an optional capability that you can activate or not early on in the admin setup of the camera. But what we have found is agencies that initially said, I don't know that that's a particularly good idea, have not gone through a critical incident where they've had to recreate or did not have video because the officer didn't activate or there wasn't an opportunity to remotely activate. Then in fact, one example in Maine, I believe it was, there was an officer who was killed by an assailant. The assailant took that officer's car, drove it around. There was an in-car camera in the vehicle. It was not activated, but it was on because record after the fact was enabled in that configuration by the administrator. This individual pulled up to a convenience store, went in and was bold enough to buy some things, came back out, and that recording of record after the fact on the in-car video actually captured that individual coming out, and they were able to actually get the video because he abandoned the vehicle. They recovered the vehicle from the subject, and they found out who he was by that record after the fact. So people that say initially, I'm not so sure I want that, they have a critical incident, and it changes their mind because they always know they're going to have a recording of an incident. We also believe in, and the last thing I'll say about the capability with the body-worn camera is the post-analysis review, how important it was. And you heard a little bit about that from the two chiefs today that talked about how important it is from a training aspect, from an accountability, from a transparency aspect of people, of supervisors, and even the individual officers themselves periodically reviewing their actions post-incident, but being able to flag a particular incident either by policy, severity, or just because they think it would be a good idea to review, a random review. Set up in our vault capability is the ability, and that's our digital evidence management solution, is the ability to flag digital evidence, particularly videos, for further review, for IA review, or for supervisory review, and the opportunity for supervisors to randomly go in and choose randomly for officers under their command to just check on. It's never, doesn't hurt to always just give a follow-up check, even for your best officers periodically, to see what activities they're going through, what types of interactions they have with the police. And I think these types of capabilities and technology, particularly in body-worn cameras and in-car cameras, will help set the stage to allow the police to be able to better monitor adherence to policies, adherence to procedures, and provide early warning signals that you're going to hear a little bit about too for follow-up when necessary. So I'm going to stop there and turn it over. Bill, do you want to go next?
Sure, Mike. Hey, always a tough act to follow, Michael, but I absolutely concur with everything that you said. So many great points. And I'll also talk about the IJIS element as well. You know, over my career, and Maria mentioned I was on the sales side, so I became a student of the industry. But that my teachers were the practitioners. They were the officers that I rode around with, or the supervisors, or the CAD dispatchers that I sat next to. That's how I learned the industry, or walking the halls of a jail and finding out, you know, what these officers were up against, and also, you know, what types of programs were in place for the inmates. This topic is just so complex. It's so multidimensional. And I think the biggest thing to keep in mind is, and we've heard it time and time again, is a multi-stakeholder approach. And it's not just a seat at the table. It is the loud voices, it's the activists, it's, you know, in a nirvana world, what would you want to see? You know, their police are there for a reason. First responders, medics, mental health workers. So, you know, talk to us. The dialogue has to be open. We need to know really the ground, the point of view that they're coming from. And then from there, you make forward progress. And yes, we're all technologists here on this call, and of course, like Sean and you, former practitioners yourselves. But technology is just a catalyst to help around all the other elements, the policy, the procedures, the governance. So as we look at this problem and police reform, in fact, our CEO Arvind Krishna actually sent a letter to Congress, and I believe it's multiple letters, one to the new president coming in, and to when the George Floyd incident happened, and it's all about supporting police reform. But so much of that, police is just one side of it. It's societal reform in many ways. And, it's what I find really refreshing to go back to when you look at modern day policing is Sir Robert Peel back in 1829. And when you read those principles and guidelines and the way that there should be respect for each other, the citizens and the police, and that use of force is a last resort, it's like you're reading a 21st century 2021 newspaper article, right, of what perhaps failed and did not happen. So, from my perspective and IBM's, we would love to help the industry, and we do help the industry globally with technology that can basically operationalize 21st century policing, to operationalize the goals and the tenets of Sir Robert Peel, to look at President Obama's task force on 21st century policing, and be able to activate really and provide actionable insight using the tools and all the data that's coming through. And then, of course, you have the bias aspect, and that is daily in our lives. I was thinking about this, and I'm biased to Coke over Pepsi, right? So these are just innate human nature pieces, but we can certainly learn and the behavioral aspects of how to control that and act upon it and take that deep breath. I heard that also talked about, and to think more clearly. So as I look at this problem, I go first to the experts. I actually go to IJIS and member organizations, to IACP, major city chiefs, major county sheriffs, all of those elements to learn about what are the points of view from the industry, to hear actually both sides of the media commentary. And then as Katie and I have the pleasure of working very closely with Katie at IBM, we love to talk about the ground truth. How do we get to the ground truth? And it's about evidence. It's about data. I heard Jim Birch say earlier about data-driven approaches. And really, this is the only way that we can uncover the facts, because otherwise it's perception. And sadly, it seems 99.9% of perception is reality these days. So especially with social media and instant access to information. So as we look at this, we like to engage our clients with really, and you've heard this before, people, processes, and technology. So that IBM loves to solve complex problems across the board, from data to governance, et cetera. And so from a people standpoint, it's all about who are the stakeholders, what data do they have, what do they need to add to the mix that will be helpful to other people, social workers, mental health care, parole officers, all of those elements. The next is the process. It's the governance, it's the monitoring, the guardrails, the reporting, the mitigation, and the course corrections that we can make. And it's also about the law, that we make sure we're complying to the law from a privacy and sovereign citizen perspective. And I'll never forget learning from the late, great Tom O'Reilly when he stood up the National SARS Initiative. And before one line of software was ever written or one tip line was ever invoked, he said, you know what, we're going to get this right from the beginning. We're going to look at the citizen view. We're going to look at the law. We're going to have governance, policies, procedures, guardrails, all those elements. And that's what really made the NSI, I think, extremely successful when it was stood up. And then finally, it's the technology. We've mentioned data. It's harvesting the data. What are the right data sources to actually use? And what are we missing? What holes in the story, the full contextual relevancy of what just occurred, can we go find somewhere else? And Mike, you mentioned streaming video. Absolutely. With streaming video, 5G, now you add the streaming analytics to that are giving us these near real-time or real-time operational insights. One example of that where we use technology was with the Newark Police Department. And we just finished up a very successful proof of technology there. And as a lot of you may know, Newark's under a U.S. Department of Justice consent decree. And when we spoke to the captain in charge of managing a consent decree, he said to me, Bill, we know the incidents we need to look at from the calls of service, from the nature of the incident and the crime. It's the other 99% that we have no eyes on. We have not, where there's smoke, there's fire, or if there's smoke, we don't even know there's smoke. So what do you have that can help us with this huge load of video that we have hundreds and hundreds of hours a week? So what we did from there, we used, and I talked to Tom O'Reilly about this, and we've named the project in his honor, the O'Reilly Project. And it was about what we call cognitive highlights for tennis. And you may watch the US Open, and it'll say Watson said these three were the top areas of today's events. So it was the same concept. It was cognitive highlights for law enforcement. And based on threshold settings, tone analysis, the types of words, action. Mike, you talked about IoT, right? Did someone draw a gun, or everything is connected to everything. All these different aspects that raise up to a threshold. And then if it goes to that threshold, to your point, now this is suspect for supervisory review. And what's beautiful from, I think, an industry perspective, IBM and Motorola, these are areas we can work as fast partners because we don't have body-worn cameras, but we do have analytics. And so a lot of our areas are to put what I love to call a cognitive canopy over the existing data sources, leverage the data that you have, the information sources, and then really make sure that you are drawing the insights that are going to give you the outcomes that you're looking for. And, really to kind of wrap up, James Northern, our other colleague that couldn't be here, and he wanted me to share this, and I completely agree. And we also heard this in the other calls, was training is absolutely foundational. Role playing, classroom, videos, real news, deconstructing what happened and what would have been a better way to handle something. And when you can do that and really role play de-escalation, or know the questions to ask for a mental health patient, and then be able to call back to dispatch and said, hey, can we dispatch social services out here, or mental health? It's just critical. The second piece is improving the standard, the status quo about how training is occurring, and really enforcing continuous learning and continuous feedback, making sure that the training is on mark. And when we talked about Newark, some of this could be, as an example, an early warning system, an early detection system of tone in an officer's voice, that we could bring them in, get them off the street. What happened? Maybe a beloved pet just passed. We're up against a lot of stress, especially in a COVID-19 world. So, and we may also look at the best behavior, what we put up as a poster child example of the way that officers are dealing with citizens. So it really goes both ways. And I mentioned major city chiefs, major county sheriffs, all being great big influencers, and IACP. The last piece I'll end on is that, and I think Chief Best started it in the previous session, was about a definition. Police reform is so broad, and there's so many aspects to it. And the old saying, how you eat an elephant, it's one bite at a time. And so looking at all the things, 20 or 30 elements that are so complex, but prioritizing them and saying, if we can solve this with a quick hit and really get credibility with our citizenry, that's where we want to start. So I'm going to pause there, Mike, and again, just happy to be here and participating with the IJIS community.
And I think, if it's all right with you, Sean, I think I'll jump in next, just because I have so much to add. As usual, Bill starts talking and I just start thinking and writing. So thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here. And what I've heard both from Mike and from Bill and some of the earlier sessions, I wasn't able to listen to all of them, but what I caught was really, I just keep writing down culture change, and then I keep writing notes beneath it, because it is so broad. And so what I've heard is, and what I think about, is a culture change both within the force, again, related to training, related to junior officers being able to step in the case of an incident like George Floyd, being able to really have a fundamental change within the force, but then also a cultural change between the force and community. That really is the big piece that I think we're missing. I've written down, we need to let them in and feel like they're a part of this. So when we've talked about technology where we have live streaming video from a citizen's phone, we're talking right now with a client about almost a Waze type platform. And I know Millennial bringing in Waze example, but if you think about getting from A to B and you have a platform where citizens are typing in, oh, there's construction happening, don't take this road. We have citizens contributing their own knowledge. What if we could integrate that with the data systems that we already have and the data sources that we already have related to public safety, related to specific to zip code, or from a broader scale as well? I think that there's a big opportunity to really give community and citizens a seat at the table. Not just that seat though, but really an active role. You are a part of this. You are helping to keep your fellow citizens safe. You're helping to keep officers safe as well. And then it becomes this bi-directional interaction where you really then gain buy-in and you gain trust. And I think that technology, I see IBM as a master integrator because that's what we've done for so many years. And really that's what we need now is master integration. If we want the culture to become more open, more trusted, more engaging of every stakeholder, well, then let's utilize a technology or many technologies. Let's build an open, trusted, permissioned platform that we can have everyone engage in their different ways from wherever they're coming from. And I really feel like in this situation, when we talk about reform, even definition, Bill, as you said, there's many definitions. A definition could be so broad. Let's include what do communities think police reform is, right? We've seen marches for months about police reform, and that's coming from community voices. Wouldn't it be fascinating to say, let's host a listening session and say, what does police reform mean to you within the force? What does police reform, what would you like to see? And it's really bringing together these voices through technology to then create one definition, to then create one platform that responds to it, that integrates all of these disparate sources and then allows us to make plans and to move forward, to heal together and to really take that next step into whatever the future is. And it's quite optimistic of me, but I have a lot of energy, so I'm sure I'll get it done if I'm able to. And I'll just end, I guess, like I said, I've written so many notes here, but I'll just end by saying that I think that in bringing community to the table, that's really, we've been getting further and further siloed within policy, because Maria had mentioned policy, that plays a big role in this, within the police force, within communities, and then within policy. We just keep moving more and more towards silos, more and more fragmented. And I think that is what's causing a lot of the unrest and the friction. So again, I think that leveraging technology to have conversations is really going to be the key in terms of moving forward together. So I'll stop there. And Sean, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hey, thanks very much. And really appreciate the opportunity to be here, especially with my esteemed colleagues on the industry side. And Bill, I got to laugh a little bit when you brought up Sir Robert Peel and his principles of policing. I've had that printed and I had it behind my desk in my office for I can't tell you how many years, and I've always looked back at it and just admired that forethinking for so long ago when it first started off. So I appreciate that. And Katie, I'm gonna jump on where you took off because it's interesting. So I just recently retired from the sheriff's office of 31 years there, and I could tell you the last year or two have been unbelievable with the community outcry. The protests that did not end, and I've been through several through my career, and they would end shortly. A few days, it would end. We'd have some meetings, and we would move on, moving forward. These did not end. These did not stop. The community outcries are not going to end, and it was very interesting, Katie, that you mentioned integrations, because I'll tell you, when I came on board with Motorola and just saw the advancement in the technologies, and more importantly, the integrations of all the different solutions to bring them together in one software system, one ecosystem. I'm very, very excited about it, very amazed by it. But then you brought in integration with the community, and you're correct. we have to engage with the community. And one of the comments here, I think I'll put out, but mentioned from the chat room, the strategy that Chief Acevedo said about including activists. Well, we should. I'll tell you, from my point of view, the protesters I saw were very young, and very angry and very upset about what was occurring. And it was an energy like I've never seen before. So engaging with the community, integrating, as you said, breaking down those silos. Again, we've got data silos, solution silos, but breaking down those community silos and engaging with them. But what's important on that, well, I think is very important, and I'll get onto a few things here along the lines of reform. We've heard countless times accountability, transparency, accountability and transparency. And I agree wholeheartedly that that is important. But to have that transparency, and we can do so much more now with the big data platforms, with the cloud-based technologies that are coming on board as law enforcement. But, and I wrote it down, that the transparency and engagement equals trust. But it has to come from the policy, the training, leadership, and engaging with that community, but it has to be consistent, and it has to go both ways. The trust has to go both ways, because Katie, I'll get off your platform. I've got my own notes here eventually, but the culture change in police, and I'm sure, you know, Mike can speak to this as well, and you've all seen it, changing the culture within police community, within an agency itself, respectively, it is very difficult. Moving that ship, turning that ship doesn't take days. It doesn't take months. It takes years, and it takes people that can be very consistent in the message, continuous in that message, because if you don't, the moment that message is broken, you lose that community, and we're back here at ground zero again. Ground truth. I think, Bill, you mentioned it, and I've heard that before, is so important to bring them in at a level we've not done before. So if I can touch on Mike just briefly, and I'll be quiet, because I'm very interested in our WatchGuard products, so the body-worn cameras. Going towards this platform of trust, transparency, engagement with the community. It has so much value, especially if it's streaming, that it gives the supervisor, in my opinion, because I look at technology from an operational standpoint, because of my background, but I also look at it from, okay, an executive standpoint, because as an executive in law enforcement, you are held responsible to engage with the community. So that streaming video, that and going back and seeing, you know, what had occurred if the camera was not on, and capturing that video allows the executives during an instant, high-profile incident, and there is a community outcry for what has gone on. Most executives want to get ahead of it. They want to get out. They want to engage the community, especially these days. But they want to have the right information. They want to have the accurate information. They want to have a comprehensive report, if you will, to the community, because the worst thing can happen is I don't have all the information, I have inaccurate information, and I lose the trust. It looks like perception's reality, that I'm hiding something, right? So being able to not only take all of the data, the reports, the supplements, but now we have body-worn camera, we have onboard or in-car camera, we have drone technology now that is really starting to advance, and I think we'll touch on that a little bit, about throwing drones out, launching them before, as a high-priority call comes out, so they can get on scene. So you think about a supervisor, they can't be everywhere at one time, but if a supervisor can actually gain access to that body-worn camera, the onboard on the vehicle, or even the drone, has a chance to actually, if he or she sees something within that situation that observes an officer actions that are not within agency policy lines or outside those bookings, they can interject immediately. They can get on the radio, they can do things to mitigate that, to stop that, and then address it afterwards. Because I believe Director Birch had made a really good point. Early warning system. I was hands down involved in ours for many, many years, but he said it should be an early intervention system, and he really made me think about that. And he really hits home. It strikes home with me, and he's absolutely correct. So I thought, well, the body-worn camera, what a great opportunity, or the dash, or the drone technology. But with those solutions, as a supervisor, immediately after an incident has been controlled and it has been resolved, of getting a hold of that officer, is sitting down and reviewing what had happened and going through it, and debriefing, as you said, will have so much more of an impact at that time in that level and writing something or correcting something, educating that officer. So we don't wait until the early warning systems of, well, yesterday, they were built on metrics. If you have 3 uses of force within 90 days, we're going to do an intervention. If you have 4 accidents within 180 days, whatever it may be, it was very policy driven, and it should be. But with the advancements in technologies, I believe it really provides law enforcement opportunity to conduct that intervention much sooner in the game, and possibly head off some unpleasant behavior or occurrences that may occur in the future. So I'll leave it at that. Sorry, I ran on a little bit.
Hey, Sean, those were great points.
No.
Thank you.
Excellent.
And one of the things I just wanted to follow up with you, and I mentioned it earlier, and I think we all hit on it a little bit, was that how different some of these serious incidents could have been had there been some supervisory intervention or the opportunity to have I would say not a disinterested, but a third party who was not immediately involved in the incident to be able to interject, but now encouraging younger officers who previously that culture wouldn't allow to intervene and make sure that those incidents do not again occur. I want to touch real quickly on some of the data discussion, because we heard so much about being data driven in our approach to try and find solutions or to try and find behaviors before they get to become a problem. And Director Davis mentioned in his that matching technology to the policing system, not necessarily using technology to find a solution for it, but using technologies to address a problem, I believe is how he said that. Mm-hmm. And it's really interesting. If Sean and I were to come into your organization to find out about it, we're not coming in just to sell you something and leave. What we want to do is understand what problems you're having. What challenges are you facing? And then what we would like to do is then have a conversation of how we can add value to your investment portfolio by implementing technologies that address those. And you don't have to have everything all at once. It's an opportunity to get into it a little bit at a time and address those issues, because like Sean said, this is not solved in a week, a month, or even a year. But to the data conversation, there's many agencies out there that don't know what they don't know, right? I mean, I know I come from an era where we wanted a solution. We implemented it in a siloed approach. We usually got a separate server for it, and we thought about integration or interfacing later on. And often we never really got to that. And it wasn't because of any malfeasance on our part, but it's just the way agencies in law enforcement are funded. They're typically funded from a CapEx environment for a specific thing, usually without any maintenance. They implement that, and then they deal with the integrations later on. That's one of the things I think that you're beginning to see some movement toward the cloud, because the big data platforms, as Scott or as Sean mentioned, is really an opportunity to get away from those siloed systems and to integrate together, where you don't have to worry about, do I have an integration? Do I have an interface? When I'm looking for information, I don't want to spend time to have to hunt in that swivel chair mode to be able to sign on to different systems and access that. I want to be able to get that information in a consolidated format back so I can make decisions, because data is the commerce of the police, right? We make decisions based on data, and we can't make those decisions on imperfect data. I call it being data rich and information poor when you have siloed systems that are not integrated. But now being information rich with the integration of all your systems. And that's where I think we need to move into an area where if we're really going to make changes, we have to look holistically within the department on all our data sets, not just use of force, but activity, discipline, human resources, traffic arrests, evaluations, peer evaluations potentially. But to be able to look at all of those data sets together to be able to provide a picture, even with dashboards for executive management on key things that they're looking for, I think will go a long way to interacting. And one final thing before I turn it back over to the group, Community engagement, we talked a little bit about that. We talked how important it was, and Sean even mentioned getting the activists and the stakeholders, but providing a conduit or a way for them to get information to the police department quickly, seamlessly, and in some cases, if they prefer, anonymously. It's important for us to get that information, to engage our community. That's where government starts, right? Where at that level, the protection of our community and of our citizens and visitors, to be able to get that transparent interaction with them, to be able to send a tip and a lead, to be able to send a video or a picture of activity that they see doesn't look just right. And then have a supervisor follow up and communicate with them. One of the things Carmen Best says is to be involved in the community, but don't invite them into your environment, go to their environment. I really like that a lot too today. But using the technology, not just because it's the shiny new item, but to be able to solve problems. So yeah. I'll turn it back over to you.
Well, go ahead, Katie. You were going to say something, I think.
Yeah, just really quickly, Bill, before I forget, and then you can
please,
turn over.
Please.
No, I'm just thinking about what you've said, Mike, about this cloud environment, right? So that we can be leveraging all of the data sets to then be information rich. I feel like that also, since we're on the topic of integration, thinking through a multi-cloud environment, right, with different permissions that's still trusted and secure, but so that we could integrate other agencies within the criminal justice system, right? So that officers can then have even more information when they're arriving to a scene. And then thinking through what you had mentioned, Sean, around the drone, getting there. I think it was Sean. I'm sorry. I've just gotten so excited writing my notes. But thinking about a drone, being able to then immediately send information back. Think about if a drone could also, if we had this multi-cloud environment with other agencies within the criminal justice system, but then also other public health agencies. If a drone could arrive there first and in some way, shape, or form understand that we might have mental health concerns, could we then somehow ping a mental health services organization and get someone to come to the scene? Because to your point of not knowing necessarily what the problem is, so not just finding a problem with our technology, but rather saying perhaps the problem is not necessarily officer behavior in all cases, but maybe it's officers not necessarily being trained to respond to mental health incidents. So, and that's fine. We can certainly address training, but there's also the ability with this multi-cloud trusted environment to loop in these other pieces, because public safety, the line between public health and public safety is a dotted line. If so, it's very blurry. So I feel like being able to really, again, integrate within all of the data sources in the police force, and then also within the criminal justice system, and then the wrapper of public health as a whole. That would be the big picture nirvana aim.
Katie, great points, and I'm glad you shared those. I'm going to jump around a little bit just from various points, because like Katie, I'm writing notes as Mike and Sean are speaking and making such great points. Going back with Katie, being agnostic, where we said, look, there's no one single solution that is going to solve this. This is a multi-layered approach and a multidisciplinary approach, a multi-data approach. And we talk about silos, and in the past we talked about collapsing those. And really what we mean is to cut across them. And I think Mike was saying something similar to that, where we're extracting the right data, because the silos exist for a reason, for the mission at hand. Dispatch is a silo of information, and that's to run your calls for service, or offender management systems, right? It's all about rehabilitation. So those silos are very important. They become the pillars that hold the house up, so to speak. But it's cutting across, it's wiring like electricity from room to room. That's the most important thing, and to get that data extracted. Data is, our former CEO, Ginny Rometty, would say, data is the last natural resource. And so again, it goes along with Mike and Sean with that, is just unbelievable. So there's all this richness, but how do we mine it? How do we organize it? How do we interpret it? And really, how do we enrich it so that as we're using it for our need, we're still serving it up for another need that another silo quote mission can take advantage of. So that a lot of that is the mapping of the processes, and again, what we're going to solve. What problem are we solving here? I'll just mention very quickly. I saw Maria come back. So citizens, the first communicators. I think that is such a huge point when something is happening, an event. Before a 911 call is even placed. And as Mike said, having a way, and Sean, I believe too, for citizens to get that information in anonymously, immediately. We can have even, and lots of times it's up on social media before that 911 call is placed. So being able to have those right alerts really give us a real-time crime center situational awareness advantage. Consortium, and I'll mention AI here. As we look at AI, it's not, you don't plug AI in and it works. It needs to be trained, and algorithms need to be created and tested and validated. Bias always is a main concern. When I was presenting to the Arizona courts a couple years ago, it was, Bill, there's case law that is wrought with bias. And you're right. So we actually need AI to basically police itself, police bias. But AI really should be looked at as that common thread. It will be the force multiplier that can help us bring about really meaningful change and transformational change. And the last piece, of course, is then the ethics side of it. And IBM's very, very big on ethics. We've created global ethics committees and organizations globally to ensure that from privacy to bias and all those other elements, that those are being monitored, detected, and corrected, and actually alerted. The old saying, if you can't explain AI, you can't use it. You have to go back. Well, why, all the way to the root cause, and then you've got something. So I'll pause there, and Sean, why don't you bring us home?
I think Sean
You're
is
on mute,
muted.
Sean.
God, Mike, I told you I was going to do that. I couldn't get through the whole thing without doing it.
The 2020
Appreciate that, Bill. You caught me off guard, but I'll
Sorry.
try and bring it home. It's okay. I just, collectively, in my own opinion, with the advancement technologies, with the cloud-based technologies, with what we've all discussed about the integrations, big data platforms, everything that I've seen, it will lend itself to really, truly allowing agencies and the community not only to engage, but to really reform on both sides, and to be continuous. Technology is great, and I've had all kinds in my past career of vendors coming to me, and this is great, solutions are fantastic. But as executives, you really have to be conscientious about the technologies that you choose, the integrations, the scalability, and what's the long-term goal? How is it going to benefit you in getting past this hurdle, changing that culture? Because to change a culture, you're also changing the perception of your culture from the community. And as I said earlier, that is probably one of the most difficult things an executive, a leader will have to do, and a community will have to do too, because they're going to have to change their perception. And it's based, I said earlier, based on transparency, engagement, equals trust. Well, I forgot one, and forgive me for it. It's accountability. And through data-driven, fact-based decision-making, data-driven and fact-based presentations of incidents to the community, so that not only is it what I'm saying, but here is what I'm showing you what happened. Of all the analytics that we have, of all the technology we have, this is the comprehensive picture of this particular incident and the reasons that we are making the judgments we are. And I think if we can continue as an industry to assist and to grow with that need, everyone is going to benefit for the long haul. Thank you.
Great. Hey, Sean, you just reminded me that it was like an emergency management, an after action report based. It's the same way. You go back and deconstruct and take the lessons learned. I think that's a great point.
So what I find amazing is that these conversations far exceed the framework or the time that we have allocated for these. In each case, and I'm almost chatting to the audience and saying in my mind, I told you so. I think that with only 60 minutes, 40 minutes, whatever we were actually able to put out there, you should be able to see the passion, the energy, the engagement, and the real understanding of these individuals. Katie, coming from her perspective, has such energy that can actually quickly understand the needs of the practitioners with the potential of the technology, and then support the change management and all the potential there. Truly is something to admire. So I thank you to all the panelists. I do want to pose a couple of questions out there. I don't have a preference as to who responds, and maybe this may be a group effort, but the first thing, though I may have some ideas, having seen the entire day with the bigger picture of the town hall and then the industry contribution, how would you all frame next steps? Meaning we all are of the same mind that this is comprehensive, that this is multidimensional, that this is multifaceted, et cetera. Knowing the complexity of it, what might be your perspectives on the top 3 things?
I'm going to defer to the practitioners first.
Okay. I thought you were going to jump in there, Bill, but go ahead.
No, I'm
Share
growing. I'm growing, Maria.
That's a great way.
I could have a comeback, but yeah.
No, I'll jump in too. But
I actually enjoyed everything. The next steps, I think, is continued collaboration, without a doubt. Open and frank discussions. To the extent that IJIS can help set the table for practitioner and industry involvement in further discussion, and perhaps a little introspection too of everyone, not just on the panel, but in the audience, but in this noble profession that we came from, to know that change is imminent, change is necessary, and we have to be the guardians of our profession. And I look forward to continuing to collaborate with people like Katie and Bill and you, Maria, and the IJIS group. We also have a group internally to Motorola on the industry team that I love speaking to, because we all come from different geographic areas of the country, and therein lies the challenge. Not everything is done the same way. So we have a long road ahead of us. We have to prepare for that, but I think we will only do it by collaborating together, continuing our open and frank discussions, and recognizing where change needs to be done, we make it.
Yep.
And thank you very much. That's why you were on our board, both you and Bill. You bring it home. So I appreciate that.
And Maria, I would just add what Mike said very quickly is you have to have that frank discussion. I think he nailed it with introspection, that each department needs to look at what's going on, as well as the governments, as well as citizens, and have that frank discussion. And, ask the question, if one side is saying, hey, systemic racism, is in the police department, and the police department's saying, no, it's not. Well, that's one of these. We are not on common ground. So what is that? And Sean said it earlier, I believe. It's the evidence-based data that will get us that ground truth. And then from there, okay, now we can admit we have the issue, and now we put a plan in place to correct it. And that means starting small. It goes to the cloud strategy. So the technical side, start small, scale big, get a proof point that is that everyone can agree on. Then it's consensus, and you have trust from the citizens, trust from the government, trust from the police that, hey, industry is here to help us, and we should engage and embrace them. And again, we're not the ones that are on the line, right? But we are the support mechanism, and we have to give them what they need. So those would be just some other kind of words of advice that if I was going to approach a client right now that had that issue, you got to have that frank conversation. We have to admit it, and we have to openly talk about it.
Wonderful. Thanks, Bill. Katie or Sean? You're muted.
I think you're
okay. All right.
You're still on mute.
Okay, go ahead, Katie. That's what I was trying to say.
Oh, I think we're about to say the same thing, which is that Mike and Bill, I think, have pretty much covered it. Mike, you said it, continued conversations. You said continued collaboration, and we just need more conversation. And that's, again, within our silos of industry, community, criminal justice, and then between these silos, we need to be having these conversations. We need to, the first step, I would say, is we as industry people need to be the conveners. We need to be bringing together community organizations that represent citizens and police force and policymakers and say, we have the technology that can help to underpin this. We can convene this group, and then you all, more or less do the work. You all tell your side of the story, tell us what you need, speak to each other, and we can be the facilitators both in process and in practice through giving the capabilities that we need. So that's a pretty big first step, but
That's a
what I
great
would
first
say.
step, though. That's actually something IJIS does well because it can bring folks to the table. So we didn't practice that, Katie, but I appreciate the plug.
Hey, Maria,
I'm always here for you, Maria.
Maria, real quick
Okay.
before Sean jumps in, Anna Lloyd just mentioned something that I think Katie just also hit on, but I want to highlight because I think it's important. And as we go through these improvements in our discussions, we keep trying to use to educate the community on our progress, maybe through social media in some form, as she rightfully points out. So thank you for that, Anna. That's a great point. And Sean, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
I don't have very much more to add other than I'll tell you I'm new to the industry, new to the industry team that Mike discussed, and it's a privilege to be with them. It's exciting, but I'll tell you, I'm old school. I came from a long time in law enforcement. Perspectives change, my knowledge change. I've learned, I've grown, and I'm telling you, the reform is needed. The change is needed. I've said it before. I'm very passionate about it. I'm excited to be on the industry side to assist and to help with that. And I'll tell you, I'm very excited listening to Bill and to Katie and the passion that they have and their expertise. That we really can get a hand on this, and we can really assist law enforcement communities as a whole, the citizenship as a community as a whole, to reform, to change that culture. And Bill, you said it best, and it's great to say it's so hard to do, but you got to do some small steps. The technology has to be done small steps. The changes have to be, because this is going to be a very long process. And the sooner that everyone involved understands that and accepts it and is committed to it, we're going to be so much better in the long run as a whole, as a country, as a community. And thank you again for allowing me to participate. I've really enjoyed this.
I thank you. I thank you all. There will be lots of next steps. My sort of crystal ball says the next couple of weeks are going to be all about planning, engaging, and touching base with several individuals, including yourselves, and then framing a big picture that we could bring the right individuals to the table. So to this group, stay tuned. To you all, I cannot thank you enough. We appreciate the valued contribution, the valued conversation, and your perspectives in this very multidimensional, multifaceted challenge that we have ahead of us. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Maria.
Take
Thank
care.
you, Maria. Thank you all.
Bye, colleagues.
Thank you.
Bye.
So for the next portion of our program, I'd like to think that we still have the majority of the audience with us. At IJIS, we have the rare opportunities over a typical calendar year to bring together our constituents from both the public and private side and honor individuals that have made a difference in the field, made a difference to the constituents, made a difference in industry, made a difference at an agency. From the individuals that we were able to share with you over these couple of days, I think even for the newcomer, you see that we have a plethora of individuals that bring some extraordinary skill sets to the table. So you won't be surprised to hear the recipients of what will be 3 awards that we're going to be discussing with you at the moment. There is a Robert P. Schuman Award, there is a Thomas J. O'Reilly Award, and there is an IJIS Corrections Information Technology Award. I'm going to tell you a little bit about a background on each of those awards. For the first award, the Robert P. Schuman Award, I'd ask the awardee to join me on stage. But I'll frame it and say that for each of the awards, the first one is going to be to an individual as a recipient. And the second and third are actually to programs and to entities that have contributed to the manifestation of the positive outcome. I obviously, for those that know the individual that's receiving it, you see him on camera, but I need to speak a little bit about the background of the award, and ultimately speak about the individual who's going to receive it. For those of you that have a long history with IJIS, anywhere in the 20+ year zone, you'll know or recall that we started off as an industry working group, and I should say industry working groups. Each of them had different subject matter areas. Each covered different domains within the justice community. Some covered just technology, emerging technology. Some covered just communications. But it was all about enabling the communication between industry and between public sector. And at that time, it was primarily with public safety, although it was for justice entire. And it was bridging, the objective was to bridge the gaps and facilitate the communication and enable the understanding of requirements and ultimately supporting the greater end. A gentleman that was wholly instrumental with a couple of other individuals in bringing that vision to bear was a gentleman by the name of Robert P. Schuman. He was the chair of those committees, the industry working group committees, and he was ultimately the president of our board of directors for several terms. He, in and of itself, for those of you that knew him, is the vision of the awardees for today and in the future. It's about vision, it's about honor, it's about supporting the greater good, it's about humility. And with all the words to describe Bob Schuman, I'm trying to be proper with the name of the award, but we knew him as Bob. All those words so accurately and so sincerely applied to this year's recipient. Certainly they apply to others as well, but I get the opportunity to speak about our recipient this year, Joe Wheeler. Joe, thank you for joining me on stage. You and I have chatted about this in the past. I will sort of speak to some of the references that several of your colleagues provided in your honor as to why we IJIS should consider you above other submissions. And then I get the opportunity again to make Joe blush because really, I just think he's an honorable guy. And I mean that from, heart and soul. So allow me to just share a couple of things about the individuals that proposed that Joe be considered for the award. First of all, from Sue Humphreys, Gatewood Consulting Group. She, like I, see all that is good in Joe. And I'm just going to give you some references from her letter. He has a true love of all things justice. He is always considering ways to improve what we do, how we do it, with steadfast goal of making justice work better for those who practice it and those that journey through it. He is all about the greater good. He is all about the end goal. He created and was instrumental in the development of the online industry directory for courts, which has become the go-to resource. He has established through the ICAC leadership the IJIS e-exchange as a standing column between NACM's court manager publication and other information summits. He has maintained what is the leadership of an advisory group that, for those that have been with us over the 2 days I've mentioned in the past, that has consistently and diligently kept at it. The past speaker, I made reference to the fact that her energy was above and beyond and would be obvious. Joe's energy above and beyond what is typical and what is anticipated is what gets you over time. Where I may say, Joe, let's do a summit every quarter. Joe says, do we want to do it every month? And the thing is, he actually believes it and actually wants to do it. And he would, with all goodness, contribute his time to get it done. So understand that as from an organizational perspective, there are so many factual results and outcomes of why Joe should be the recipient of this award. But there are so many equally qualitative stories of the resounding desire and intent and goodness that he brings to the table that actually inspire individuals to follow him and to commit to his vision, to his goal, and to the collective mission that we all stand ready to support. So, Joe, my heart and soul, wish I could give you a little bit of a hug. We can't even do that. That being said, I will share the podium with you, ask you to share some thoughts with us, and then I will display your award here, a little bit like the old days of Vanna, and then send that to you so that you get to see it yourself.
Thank you, Maria. This award honors Bob Schuman, a man who started the IJIS Institute and understood the need for technology in the justice space and for bridges between those technologies in the justice space and between agency systems and processes there, and also bridges between people in industry and government, because that's where a lot of the technology for this problem space gets developed. This award this year is really not about me, but more about all of those people that made this journey with me. Key are my kids and my wife, Karen, who gave me the space to do all this stuff that I'm so hot to go about. And frankly, weekends patched me back together after all those long trips across the country, talking to folks around the country here, and sent me packed and back out there again. But it's also about my partners and the staff at MTG and now with Mission Critical Partners, who provide insights and in-kind services that made a lot of those initiatives go and made them all happen. A heavy investment on their part. Another key aspect are the great industry partners I've had on the courts committee, and all the innovative solution providers out there, including and particularly IJIS members that have latched on and addressed the problem space that we're dealing with here. So, as I look at this, it is also critical to consider fundamentally some of the folks you've heard from this week. Agency leaders with vision that understand how to translate what their vision and strategy is and where technology can really make a difference. So as I look going forward, I see three distinct challenges. As Ron Davis pointed out today, we need to understand the strategic vision and the needs of the justice community that we serve, even when that community is changing right before our eyes with all the dynamics that are going on, as fluid as the world is today. Secondly, in industry, we need to build modern products, tools, methods to meet the needs of that strategy. And Katie pointed out thinking about leveraging the platform, taking different paradigms as we put our products together so that they weave together into a fabric that can really support mission. And then the third challenge really is an individual level, that we all make day to day the investment that goes beyond our needs of the moment, our objectives, and builds bridges out to consider how our applications can fit with other technologies, how our agency can work with other agencies and manage the process flow to serve the citizen better, and how government and industry can work more collaboratively to get those technologies in place sooner and have better technologies in place as a result. So that's the journey I see before me as I savor this award and get back out there and go at it again. And I really want to just invite all of you to come on that journey with me. It'll be great.
Well, we will definitely join you at the IJIS Institute. And though you can't see that, Joe, it's actually a very beautiful award and it's a pretty box as well. So I think it's all good. Sorry, we got a little shine going on there. But all that said is I could not be happier. I mean, we understand the competition was rough, but I could not be happier that you are the awardee. And you do us proud. You honor us with being part of the family. We are proud to have you as not only our chair of the advisory committee, but as a member and distinguished member of the IJIS community that represents us. So please know with all of our heart and soul, we are very appreciative for having you. So thank you for everything.
Thank you.
All righty then. It gets better. We continue on. I got to tell you a little bit about Joe, the individual, and now I get the opportunity to share with you and honor what are individuals that represent programs. Programs that will then be discussed with and some particular shared with the individuals that have led the realization of those objectives. So let me tell you a little bit about the award. The next award we're giving out is the first Thomas J. O'Reilly Innovation Award. That is one that I could also speak to from individual experience. Thomas J. O'Reilly, though he was never a board member of the IJIS Institute nor of the IWG, had been, unfortunately, this is in the past, we've lost him, was a friend to the IJIS Institute for probably 10 plus years. And he was a practitioner at the state level in the state of New Jersey, and he led what was hometown and homeland initiatives, both across the state and nationally. Some of you know him as the director of the nationwide SAR initiative. Some of you know him from NCJA. Some of you know him from what was the National Fusion Center Association. But he too, actually very much like Joe and like Bob, was a selfless individual that saw the need within the public sector, understood the value of partnerships, understood the dedication that was of critical need, and always, always, always thought outside the box. For those of us that knew him well, if he had a napkin or if he had a piece of paper and he would be writing with his left hand, he would tell you his version of the world or his ideas with a graphic. Now, loving him, I can say that the graphics were usually pretty barbaric, and we would all get a hoot out of trying to understand what his interpretation was. But I stress that and I share that because he was the inspiration for this innovation award. There was nothing that was off the table. There were no ideas that shouldn't be considered. And thus the rationale for naming this award in his honor and then getting nominations for programs and recipients that mirrored that image. Now, I dare say that the individual that I was going to bring to the table seemed to walk away from his desk. So, Sean, are you with us? You can unmute yourself now.
Okay. Hi there.
Good afternoon, Sean. I just saw you walk away, and I'm thinking the timing is a little off on that, but I will share.
I had to plug this laptop in.
I appreciate that. That's probably an important thing to do. So Sean Malinowski is the Director of Policing and Innovation and Reform out of the University of Chicago Crime Lab. The program that he is going to chat with us about is the Strategic Decision Support Center. His partners at the table that I'm sure he will mention was Bob Carter, Commercial Head from the Public Safety and Justice Smart Cities for Genentech, and Rick Zach, Director of Public Safety and Justice for Microsoft. As with any initiative of this magnitude, sort of the theme with both the pandemic response and the reform response, it's multifaceted, it's comprehensive, it's not a single response, it's not single threaded. That's the sort of the result is obvious with the benefits that this program brought to the table. So Sean, if I could impose on you to share from your personal experiences a little bit about the program, its objectives, and then I will award you the lovely plaque that we have here for you.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you for this honor for the University of Chicago, the Chicago Police Department, and all our partners, including Genentech and Microsoft. Bob Carter, as you mentioned, was a big part of this problem solving. And what we did in Chicago, for those of you that don't know, is we had that really outrageous spike in violence in 2016. At that time, I was chief of detectives in the Los Angeles Police Department and was sent essentially on loan to Chicago to work with Eddie Johnson on a solution. And that's where I met Bob Carter and learned about Genentech and the outstanding platform they already had set up in the Chicago Police Department. And we have ShotSpotter involved and Microsoft, obviously. But they weren't really using the technology to its full extent, and they didn't have a process in place. So we took a process from other police departments, including Los Angeles, and built essentially nerve centers, or what you could call them. They're almost like the spokes, and the hub would be a real-time crime center. So local information and process, not just keeping track of all of the cameras, which Genentech lays out for us very easily, but setting up an intelligence process every day in a daily discipline to fight crime. So in the end, you know, what I hear about Thomas J. O'Reilly, it really makes me think this is the kind of initiative that he would have done a drawing for you on. You know, we could have used him because we struggled with this and we really wanted this to be a Chicago solution. And I appreciate the agility of all of the partners who were involved to really design something that was specific in a crisis. You know, it's one thing for a technology partner to say, well, here's our product, use it off the shelf. And it's another thing for Genentech, Microsoft, and others, ShotSpotter as well, to say, we're going to work with you to optimize this solution and then scale it up. You know, we heard a lot about that in the last session about doing things that are data-driven, fact-based, and that start small and then scale big. And I think this initiative fits all of those. I did want to thank Rosanna Ander and Jens Ludwig, who are two of my partners at the University of Chicago Crime Lab, who took a big risk in getting involved in this effort in 2016. But I think they felt compelled. We had nearly 800 murders in the city that year. It was up over 300 murders from the previous year. And they took a risk and they basically mortgaged the crime lab to try to finance this. And we did end up getting funding from Ken Griffin. And he was able to allow us to hire analysts. So we also, in this project, elevated the stature of analysts. If you can believe it, in Chicago, they didn't have one crime analyst in the second largest police department in the country. We acclimated them to that concept. We had about a dozen of our data scientists who were trained to go in and act as crime analysts. And now they have over a dozen of their own crime analysts working in these 21 strategic decision support centers. So I think we also need to recognize the contribution of Jonathan Lewin, who was the chief information officer at the time in Chicago, and Eddie Johnson, who was the superintendent. Both of these gentlemen with 30 plus years on the job could have shut me out, you know, coming from the university, coming from another police agency. And what I really admire about them is they did what they had to do in a crisis, and they kind of emptied their cup and were self-critical, and we came up with a solution together. And, you know, that solution, and I know Bob Carter and Genentech folks are well-schooled on this, but that solution, I was looking at the numbers here, we went from about 800 murders one year and about over 4,000 shootings. Next year, we were down 120 murders and about 1,000 shootings. And then 2 years after that, when we had all of the SDSCs operating, we dropped below 500 for the first time in several years. Now, still 495 murders is a lot, but even if you look at a cost-benefit analysis, even if you take the human suffering out of the equation, which is difficult to do, the city, for really very little money, when you start thinking about a subscription service to Genentech and some innovation funds we got from outside, you know, each of those homicides was costing the city between $1 and $9 million. Each of the shootings was about $500,000. So we're talking on the order of many hundreds of millions of dollars and many hundreds of lives, and possibly many thousands of victims not being shot over the 3-year period. So those partners that I mentioned, if you do nothing else in your career, then have worked on that project with us and really went out of your way to not just think about profit, but think about saving lives. I think you had a career high in what you were able to contribute in Chicago. So I just wanted to thank everyone. I very much humbled and to be able to accept the award on behalf of Crime Lab and Chicago Police Department, Genetech, and our partners.
Thank you, Sean. I'm going to show you your award as I did to Joe.
That's lovely.
It's quite beautiful. You don't see it too well in this lovely box, but be that as it may, we will forward that to you. And I'll just conclude with a couple of remarks. First of all, hearing you describe the program itself and knowing Tom, he would have loved to hear all those details. It had the response to the local needs. It had the model and the ability to transcend to the larger picture and to service other agencies and other jurisdictions nationwide. And he would have been so pleased with the results. So being his first honoree in this award, I ask that you wear it well, and I'm very proud that we were able to do that for you.
Thank you so much. I'm humbled, like I said, and I really appreciate from such a prestigious group to receive this award on behalf of my partners.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you to your group. Congratulations to all of you.
Thank you.
Okay, so for our last award, again, a very prestigious group, a very valuable group, and one that we're proud to call IJIS members. The third award is the first ever Corrections IT Recognition Award. We have a couple of firsts here. This is like the Thomas J. O'Reilly Award. This is about a program and that the award is to a team. Though we have an individual or two or three that might join us, at the end of the day, this is about the end result and about the outcomes of a particular program. So I think that I have the pleasure, not having met you before, sir, I think I have the pleasure of meeting Executive Deputy Secretary of Community Corrections and Reentry out of Pennsylvania DOC, Department of Corrections, George Little. Secretary Little, is that you?
That is me. Thank you.
All righty then. I'm honored to meet you. I'm pleased to meet you. The Corrections Award, the team achievement, focuses on what is the technical innovation. Another one, technical innovation between a solution provider and a correctional agencies that, of course, contributes to the advancement of the outcomes and the support of public sector. Though I have plenty of paperwork in front of me to tell you about why we selected you and why you are all so very worthy of this award. It would be a pleasure to hear from you a little bit about the program, a little bit about the objectives and some of the outcomes, because I think the personal touch always is to all of our advantages.
Absolutely. And hopefully we'll be able to add Director Aaron Brown, who's our Director of the Office of Population Management. We may be having some technical issues, but one thing about corrections, we are flexible and we'll carry on. So with that said, this particular initiative grows out of a partnership with Lehigh University and some work there around our inmate assignment decision support system, which really optimizes the use of the resources that the department has. The Pennsylvania Department of Correction has been at the forefront of the use of evidence-based practices and data for many, many years, going back before our current Secretary, John Wetzel, who is certainly a strong proponent of those approaches, but to Dr. Jeffrey Beard as well. But particularly under the leadership of Secretary Wetzel, we've engaged in a number of partnerships to bring really best practices to the forefront and using the data that we have. This particular innovation takes the data that the department has been able to collect and applies it to our operations to optimize the use of the scarce resources at this point of our institutional beds by security level, matching up with the programs that are available so that we can meet inmate needs. This enhances the safety within our institutions. It advances our mission of rehabilitation, which, by the way, this has been one part of a process that has led to lower and lower recidivism rates, even as we've expanded the application of this program. And it allows us to address the complexity of running a large system at its peak, some 51,000 inmates. Now, during the COVID era, down to about 39,000. And part of that has been the successful programming that we've been able to apply. This partnership not only has brought in the academic world, but has brought in our department's information technology resources under Director Dustin Rhodes, our planning and research division, which was instrumental in working with Lehigh University, and Dr. Brett Bruckland, and then our Office of Population Management under the leadership of our current director, Aaron Brown. I wish Aaron was able to join us right now and can talk a bit more about the particulars of the outcome. But suffice it to say, we've seen tremendous improvements in our ability to get new intake as well as existing individuals in our system in the right place at the right time. And we're also looking at expanding this application to our reentry programs to better match up the programs and resources that are available there. So this is one good example of taking a data-based approach, linking it up with evidence-based practices in partnership with the community at large in a way that benefits the Commonwealth and hopefully could be replicated in other systems.
That's wonderful, Secretary. We appreciate the valuable explanation. Let me ask you, are we clear that Aaron is unable to join us? Alex, is that a yes? Okay.
So it would seem.
Okay, so silence is consent.
Yes, that is correct. I'm trying to get her up on stage. Unfortunately, it looks like she's running into some technical difficulties, but I'll continue to try if we can get her in the next minute or so.
No worries. I'm going to show the Secretary the award. As with the others, you can't really see the script, but it's written out to all three of the partners. And to that end, we will make sure to have the right address and make sure to get that to you within the week or two. Please know that as an honoree of the IJIS award, in this case, as with others, it's something that we hold as a model for other members in the future. And we hope to share the results and the accolades with other constituents in the future. So the lessons learned that you could share with other correctional facilities, the challenges that you've shared, the lessons that you've learned, and the benefits that you are now realizing would be extraordinary, because it's just something that we see as model, and we certainly appreciate your sharing that.
Absolutely, and we look forward to sharing.
Wonderful. I thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for the award.
No worries. So for the next couple of minutes, there's only a couple of things that I would like to address. So bear with me as we bring the symposium to a close. First of all, I want to thank all of our panelists, all of our SMEs, all of our academia, all of our experts, all of our national leaders on what have been, I would say, two extraordinary topics. And I think, at least from my perspective, two rich days on the pandemic and on the need for reform. When we talk about next steps, I think about all that we've accomplished that you don't yet know about. One of the challenges with this virtual environment is that we don't get to tell you about everything that we have on our plate in addition to the topics that we've actually spoken to you about. My hope was to share a couple of those. So I will tell you that in addition to some of the detail you heard from the committees, we, from an IJIS perspective, not only hope to focus on what are these two strategic objectives of the pandemic response and of the reform needs, but also focus on what are traditional issues within the justice community, within the need to share with health and human service needs, to address ongoing challenges that we have with background checks, to focus on what are the person-centric needs and potential that Jim Pingle mentioned in one of his updates, to scratch the surface of supporting the need for modernizing crime statistics, which in and of itself is a handful. And as I mentioned in one of my previous discussions, many of the topics that we look towards and we have on our to-do list fall in one of two categories. They're the short-term needs that we're able to put out and accomplish and share with the constituency, and they are the longer-term holes or the longer-term strategic opportunities that have a greater benefit for the multiple domains that we work with. be it justice, be it public safety, be it health and human services, be it education, be it homeland security, be it so many more. There are so many opportunities. We potentially will never be out of business because we have so many challenges at hand. But we are rich with what are the resources to bring to the table and address these challenges. How we plan to do that will be in some of the traditional mechanisms that we do via IJIS, which could be the national events and could be the technical assistance and programs and national initiatives that we run. We also, in this virtual environment, for however long this lasts, plan to spend a little bit more time on topic-specific summits. I don't recall if the Emergency Communications Committee update included the intention to have what is an Emergency Communications Summit in the earlier part of this year, so certainly by June of this year, in order to address the results of some of the activities that the committee itself has had and to bring together various practitioners to address the ongoing challenges that remain. I think for anybody that's new to the environment and even old to our environment, our baseline formula is to put all the problems out there, prioritize them, and start to scratch the surface on how to address them. And of course, that may sound very simplistic, but of course we do so with a framework, with a policy, with methodology, with the promulgation of standards, et cetera. What has been starkly obvious in needing something and what we hope to still address as well to that summit list is having a summit on the need for reform. With all of the speakers that we brought together, there was no doubt in any of our minds that we were going to have a good conversation, that we were going to have lots of ideas that were going on, and that we were going to have engagement by the speakers. What it tells me, however, with some of their input and what we already knew to be the case, is that there is a lot that IJIS and IJIS community can do to support this cause. Some of those ideas were put on the table verbatim. Others are on that graphic either in my head or on the white wall that brings together all of the partners that the IJIS community brings to bear. And I make reference not only to the industry members that are so very valuable to solve so many of these challenges, but to the practitioners from the federal space, the state areas, the local enterprises in all of those domains. Reform in and of itself seems to focus on public safety or justice, but the implications far exceed that to other domains. So just the reference that I want to say was Chief Azevedo mentioned earlier, you take something away or you have a responsibility that is off of the traditional path of dealing with somebody that may have mental health issues, as an example, you're bringing in another domain. And whether you either decide to hand that off back to that domain, or whether you end up bringing them as a partner to your table, there's implications that far supersede the classic definitions. To that end, what IJIS is amongst many things that I consider does best is bringing those stakeholders to the table, is convening that disparate group, is bringing together those individual concepts and ideas, marrying them into a larger picture, and then collectively, and I emphasize collectively, identify the priorities that we could start to work on. Several of the ideas as it relates to reform and as it relates to the pandemic are ones that bringing those individuals to the table, in my mind and in our team's mind, is about parceling out the enormous amount of work that will result from those sessions. How we do it from a financial standpoint is probably a task or a solution for another day. But knowing that we have the energy and the resources and the skill sets to bring to the table in order to contribute and impact positively the outcomes is what we're going to focus on. So with all that in mind, know that the accomplishments of the past, that we couldn't tell you all about them, will be mirrored in all of the potential of the future. We hope that the 2 days, despite some of the housekeeping challenges that we had, despite our loss of internet connectivity, despite some of the challenges that we have with this particular platform, know that the IJIS team, representing the board of directors, representing our staff, representing our larger community, has been proud to put this initiative and this event together. We're proud of the outcomes because we believe that there's been a lot of substance that has been offered to you to make you think a little bit more, to put some of these pieces together in the larger puzzle, and that represents us well. While we unfortunately remain in this virtual environment, we will do our best to stay out there and to continue to connect our worlds as effectively as possible. We would ask that you have patience with that you get engaged in that. If you're not already a member of IJIS, I hope you see the value in being one. It gets you at the table. It has these type of discussions. It enables you to influence the solutions that are put out there. And those solutions, in my mind, will never be solely about technology. They are about all that we discussed over these 2 days. So I appreciate your contribution and your participation in the event. I thank the staff of IJIS that have worked tirelessly at this for several months. I have to give just dues and special attention to Alex McAdoo that most of you, at least from the program side, have known. He has rocked on this. He has done a great job. And for those that I might know more personally, we can share some great stories afterwards. But know that we're proud to have put this on. We appreciate your commitment to the IJIS Institute, to this event, and to the field. So thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you again in person in the future.